And just like that, the transfer test is all finished for another year. Well, for the primary 7 students, if your child is in primary 6, they are getting ready to start their transfer test journey, and they are going to be the next batch of students to take on the transfer test. It sounds a bit like a bush ticker trial, doesn't it? They're going to take on the transfer test. And I know it seems like a long ways away, but the time really does fly in. I'm going to give you 7 easy ways which you can use to start your child's transfer test journey. Tip number 1 is to take note of any topics that your child struggles with. So this can be any topics from what they're covering in school to what they're getting for homework. And usually the workload in primary 6 just skyrockets and there's a lot of homework. And it can be easy to lose track of what they're learning, how they're getting on. And there's so much to cover that you might find that before your child's actually mastered a topic, they've moved on to the next one. So what you can do is grab a notebook, grab some markers. I usually say green, orange and red. So red for your child just finds the topic completely tricky and they really need to go over it. Orange is they can do some of the questions, but they do need a little refresher. And green is they're good to go, they know how to do it and they're fully confident with it. So in your notebook, you can put the topic name, so fractions of amounts, for example, put the date and then mark with your colour how your child is getting on with it during homework time. This means that when it comes to transfer test revision, you can go through that notebook, pull some topics, and you're going to hopefully change all those orange and red dots to green. Tip number 2 is to start practicing activities where your child has to find spelling, punctuation and grammar errors. And this is a huge part of the English section of the transfer test. And what I find is that when my students have first had to do this activity, they find it really difficult and really tricky. So my advice is to start those types of activities early, and then when it comes to practice papers, your child already has experience of doing these activities. So what you can do for this is grab some paper, grab a whiteboard and write a few sentences that either have one spelling, punctuation or grammar mistake or none. And your child has to read the sentence and find the error or say that there's no error. You can also grab the sheets that I use during my tutoring sessions on my website, and they have all of these activities ready to go for you. Tip number 3 is reading before bed. I am gonna go on about this one till I am blue in the face, but reading before bed is a brilliant habit and routine to get into. As well as being a relaxing and unwinding activity, it will help with vocabulary development and understanding written text as well, which are key skills for all part of life, never mind the transfer test. So this is one for everybody, even for you too, parents. It is a really lovely, relaxing activity. It'll make your eyes sleepy and help you get a really good night. Tip number 4 is to keep times tables and number facts fresh in your child's mind. Having a quick recall of the times tables is really important for the maths section of the transfer test, as well as throughout primary 6 and primary 7, because this can make a huge difference when your child is under a time limit. So a good idea is to keep going over those times tables, and it doesn't mean that you need to sit down and write them out every night. That's not what I mean at all. Maybe once a week, if you're sitting in traffic or you're playing catch in the garden, you can play a little times tables game just to keep all those fresh in your child's mind. But some other number facts that you can go over to keep fresh in your child's mind are square numbers, cube numbers, triangular numbers and prime. Tip number 5 is to create some revision cards or posters along the way. So this means when transfer test rolls around, you're not running to Home Bargains and clearing the shelves of coloured card, felt tips and glitter, because you've been doing it along the way, so you will have your own stash of SEAG revision material. So for example, if your child is learning about the different types of angles for their homework, you can make some revision cards on acute angles, right angles, reflex angles, obtuse angles, write down what they are, how to recognise them, and that's it. You have your little revision card stash on angle. Tip number 6 is to introduce a short practice paper, and I mean a short one, so no longer than 30 minutes. I recommend sitting down with your child, grabbing a 30-minute practice paper. You can actually get a free one on my website, and you're going to do it together. So you're not going to set a timer and leave them there. You're going to sit down, read through the comprehension, read through all the maths questions aloud and talk about them. Talk about how you would complete this question. Ask your child, have they learned this in school? Because some of the topics they won't have covered yet, and that's okay. So if they don't know how to do something yet, that's completely fine. Just put a little star beside it and you'll know that they haven't covered that yet. The key thing here is to set a couple of practice papers at home with your child before they start sitting them in school. And the reason for this is you're going to take away the unknown of practice papers for them, because you're going to be doing it in a nice relaxing atmosphere. You're taking it slow, taking your time, and your child probably will still be a bit nervous before they do some in school, but you are taking away some of that unknown. Tip number 7 isn't for everyone, but that is to visit some school open days and open nights. So you can go to a school open night even if your child's in primary 6. I do recommend this if you think that this will motivate your child to work hard in the transfer test, if it will sway their decision towards sitting the transfer test, or you just think that it's be a really great motivator and give them some positive vibes about secondary school, then definitely go and see them. But if you think this will give your child anxiety or stress going to a big school and seeing it at this stage in primary 6, then don't go. You don't have to. You can wait until primary 7 to do the open nights, and that's the way it always was. Everyone would have really waited to primary 7. It's just the last few years people have started to go in primary 6, which is completely fine, but you don't have to. So if you think this will stress your child out or make them upset, then don't do it. Just ignore tip number 7. And the last thing that I will say about this is don't put too much pressure on your child, especially at this stage. This is just the beginning of their transfer test journey. It is going to be a long journey. There are going to be some bumps along the way. There'll be tears, there'll be tantrums, but there'll be lots of smiles hopefully too. And we just want to have happy, confident learners at this time. And